everyone. Welcome to the podcast where we explore the art of living well inside. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into something truly extraordinary. So, ever wondered how ancient wisdom and the personal creativity can transform your modern life? Right. So, we'll talk about it, but before that, joining us today is the brilliant Owen Ó Súilleabháin. So, welcome to the show, Owen.
Thank you very much, Avik. Great to be here.
Lovely, lovely. So, Owen, before we start our conversation, I'd quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Owen is an artist, philosopher, leadership coach, and a soulful storyteller. So, with roots in Celtic spirituality and a career that spans collaborating with legends like Steven Spielberg and Russell Crowe, his mission is to heal the epidemic of loneliness through the power of ancestral traditions and creativity. So, dear listeners, this episode is packed with the insights, inspiration, and the practical ways to reconnect with ancient wisdom and also at the same time unleash your creative potential. So, ready to unlock the secrets to a more meaningful and fulfilling life? So, why to wait? Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you very much, Avik. I'm nervous now. I don't know how I'm going to deliver on those extraordinary promises. I wish I was so easy as I could just snap my fingers. But yeah, it's wonderful to be here. I love the work that you're doing and these questions that you're asking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It really means a lot. And so to start with, I mean, Owen, I'll quickly ask you, what inspired you to intervene, ancient Celtic wisdom with the modern leadership and the creativity?
Well, I was, of course, an accident of birth, the beginning of starting. I was born in Ireland. I was born in Ireland into a family of musicians and academics. So while we were performing music and watching other performers, we were also talking about the power of culture and the power of performance to influence our personal and our social lives. So so I was always looking at my over my parents' shoulders at the great work that they were doing in Ireland. And me and my brother then started to perform together. I've one brother, he's 4 years younger than me, and we've performed together for our whole lives. And as we started to perform together, we were invited to work with a poet called David Whyte. Fabulous poet. He's based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States of America. And David has been a great pioneer of bringing poetry into corporate America. He had a great book called The Heart Aroused, Poetry and the Preservation of the Soul in Corporate America. So through working with David, I've had this extraordinary apprenticeship, seeing how the power of poetry, the power of the arts, the power of connecting into an inherited ancestral wisdom has very real and very powerful impact in our lives, in our organizational lives, our professional lives, and our personal lives. So just by following these steps, these invitations, taking things one step at a time, I've ended up where I am today. Yeah, working in this field.
Wow, that's really awesome, I would say. Thank you so much for sharing this. And also, if you can share, how does connecting with the traditional art and mythology heal the loneliness that we face today?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll sing you a song, actually, Avik, and through this song, you'll get a sense of that.
Sure.
This is a song from the Irish tradition, and in Ireland, our traditional language is the Irish language, Gaeilge, and so all of Irish culture used to be sung and spoken in the Irish language. But then as our English neighbours started to settle and civilise the Irish, the English language started to appear more in Irish culture. And so you'd see in the songs historically, maybe 300 years ago, an Irish word or an English word or an English line would appear in a song. And then one verse would be in English and one verse in Irish. And this is a very interesting song I'm going to sing you a little portion from, because there is only one sentence remaining in the ancient Irish language. And this is a love song, a song of great yearning and great desire. And the singer is calling in all of the beauty of the natural world and singing about the love of their life. And at the end of each verse, the singer says, Is er éireann ní nósin cé Is er éireann ní nósin cé And for Ireland, I'll not speak her name. But for Ireland, I'll not speak her name. And I always find it so beautiful that in this song, in the English language, that one secret, it remains in the ancient wisdom tradition, in the language of the ancient wisdom tradition. And the secret is holding something back and acknowledging something precious in yourself that is beyond words, beyond all yearning, that there's a deep fire within us that we should always be singing to and always be in relationship with. And it is something that is always beyond our own words. Yet we can feel it, we can sense it, we can be in communion with it through the arts and through calling in the spirit of our inheritance that our ancestors have passed on to us. So I'll give you a go of this. It's called Is er éireann ní nósin cé Let's see here. And I'll just give you a couple of verses of it. Real. There's a home by the Crowe, sweet Avonmore, that flows into the broad open sea, and the rivers that break through the foam, and the bulrushes wave in the breeze. The green ivy clings round the door, and the birds sweetly sing on each tree. To my darling sweet notes they do pour. Is er éireann ní nósin cé Her father's riches in store of cattle, corn, and great wealth, and fine land by lovely Glandor, whilst I have my youth and good health. For she is the fond maid I adore, and kindly she waits there for me. He bide the old stire in lovely grandeur. Is er éireann ní nósin cé Is er éireann ní nósin éireann ní nósin cé
Wow, so lovely. What a tune, what a I'd say what a meaning. And I really loved it.
It's lovely. And you'll see there that song, you can listen to that song on so many levels. And you can hear this beautiful, sweet song of love that can be just so pleasant and easy on the ear. But then, of course, there are so many other layers of meaning there and so much wisdom in that song. I've been singing that song for, my goodness, 15 years maybe. And all the time it opens up and it has deeper messages and deeper teachings to impart. And so that's really the whole message of songs that have been passed on, that have survived over the years. Culture survives for a very specific reason. There's a reason that these songs, these poems, these dances, these gestures repeat and are passed on, sometimes against all the odds, sometimes against forces that are trying to eradicate this culture and trying to make sure that these things do not pass on, and yet they still survive. And there has to be a very important reason why these things are passed on. And the reason is because this culture, this ancestral inherited wisdom, has a medicine for us. It is something that we need to hear and experience in our world today in order to solve the pain that we are experiencing in our modern lives.
Wow, that's really true. And wow, I mean, I do not want to say anything much because it really the tune itself says everything. So that's really the great one. Yeah, yeah. So also and for the listeners, like, how can listeners practically integrate the ancestral wisdom into their daily routines without feeling overwhelmed? If you can share anything.
I think it's quite easy. You know, we have these voices within us that stop us and block us from owning our sense of culture. And really, the whole thing to do is to stop listening to these voices within ourselves and stop having that conversation. And like that song says, and for Ireland, I'll not speak her name. Really, the whole idea is to not do something rather than to try to do something. So, for example, your own tradition in your own family, everybody knows what I'm talking about, and each individual person knows what part of culture they're interested in that they haven't fully taken ownership of and called their own. And each one of us knows what that is. That could be something from, I mean, in your case, perhaps, some extraordinary, there are so many ancestral traditions within the country of India, so many extraordinary wisdom traditions within that country. And so you know that there's something there yourself that comes to mind that you haven't yet, or perhaps have only very superficially or in a small way investigated. So for me, for example, both my parents were great traditional musicians, at an international level. And for me to really get involved with connecting to that music myself on my own ground, I actually had to start to perform with my mother. And so I would go to my mother and learn the songs from her and then travel with her and sing with her on stage. Now, that's a very dramatic way of doing it. But that's what was around me. That was what I had to turn toward and to own. But for other people, it could be much more subtle, like even just Googling something or checking something out on Apple Music or Spotify or ordering a book, and spending a bit of time in connection with that poem that you always knew was there. Perhaps your parents were into it, or your grandparents, or someone that you knew was into this type of music or this type of art. Bring that back into your life and sit down with it and spend some time with it and give yourself permission to engage with that piece of art. And in doing that, interesting things will happen. There'll be all sorts of voices in your head, voices of encouragement, but also voices, negative voices telling you, that you're not enough or that this is a waste of time. And push through all those voices, and always something good will come of it. Meaning is a great word. Meaning emerges when we engage with the world in an artistic and creative way. And that sense of meaning, really, there's no better sensation than the sensation of meaning,
Exactly. Exactly true. Yeah. And also, like, have you faced any resistance from people who struggle to see the value of spirituality in the professional or maybe in the corporate spaces?
Yeah, it's interesting that I mentioned that poet David Whyte. David is now in his 60s, late 60s even. So he was pioneering poetry in the corporate world back in the 90s. And back then he was very much a pioneer. And now, 30 years later, there's a whole second generation, maybe even a third generation of people who have seen people like David White and have seen other contemporaries of David's really pioneer this field. And so I'm part of that second generation, really. And so I'm aware of a whole bunch of people doing this kind of work. And then there must be 10 times or 100 times more people who I'm not aware of, you know? And so there certainly is a sense of a next generation forming, a sense of scale, but it's very organic, I would say. And so while David and his pioneers may have faced a lot of resistance from the corporate world or from a civilized society, I think today there's a shift in things, especially as there's a generational shift occurring with the generation that has been called the baby boomers are starting to leave the workplace. And another generation is coming that is much more comfortable in negotiating with complexity and with recognizing that our societies and our workplaces are extremely complicated places that defy logic very often, especially as work becomes more and more cooperative and intercultural and international. The artistic and the invisible parts of human life and human relations are becoming more and more recognized as a place of great productivity. So I do think that there is a next generation. Now, it's still a very, very small part of our modern life, but it is a part that is growing. And I would predict it's going to grow. It's going to become more and more popular. I believe that's where our global culture is going, is toward a greater recognition, a re-evaluation of the arts, of creativity, and of ancient inherited wisdom in our modern lives.
Wow. And what do you say? I mean, what's a simple but transformative exercise that listeners can do today to reconnect with their creative or the spiritual roots?
I think that again, I'm a great believer in each one of us knowing what that is. You know, like I think I know what that is in my life, and you know what it is in your life. I know already. So I do a part of my work is leadership coaching. And so I work with leaders who I call visionary leaders, people who are taking organizations into unknown territories. Entrepreneurs are all visionary leaders, you know, creating something out of nothing. And in that work, I have no program that I teach. There's no program or exercises that I give, because each person that I work with is an individual universe, and each person is the wise elder of their own lives. So the more that I can encourage others to acknowledge their own wisdom within themselves, everybody knows each of us knows how to solve our own problems. We just have to be in conversation and spend a little bit of time creating a clearing in our lives to invite that voice that we have within to come out. So pragmatically, what would I say? I would say, number one, get in conversation with someone on this level. Have a chat with someone. It could be a loved one, a family member, a friend, or perhaps, you know, if you have some resources, you could engage with a professional coach, with a business coach who can speak to you on this level. Have a conversation about this. With, you know, what does creativity mean in your own life? What does connecting with ancestry mean in your own life? And overhear yourself saying what that might be. You know, each person is so individual, and so because each person ultimately is a miracle. I mean, it's an absolute miracle that any one of us is alive, and each person is a whole universe. Each one of us is the inheritor of everything that has come before, and all of the ancestors that have come before us. We are the product of all of that. So that's what I do. I say to each person, you know the answer to that question, and I can only be in conversation with you about it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, it's not an argument, but then also like the modern self-help practices already address the loneliness. But if you can share, like, how is the ancestral wisdom different or better?
Well, so yeah, it's the same, really. It's the same thing. But again, it's like saying to yourself, looking at your own individual story. So looking at your own family story, and your own social story, the society you grew up in. What are the things in that culture in the past that have interested you? I think that there's something really interesting in going back into the past of the culture that you've been raised in, and exploring that culture and saying, what's here today that has survived those generations, those centuries, that speaks to me in some way. Go to those things and experience them. Go to that art gallery, go to that concert, or listen to that music, read that poetry, read that novel, and engage in it as a co-owner of that, an inheritor of that work. I think that that's just an interesting way to approach things, rather than trying to come up with the idea yourself, that we're not a blank slate. We are the sum of everything that has come before us. And so I think that in our modern world, there's a great sense of each individual being a blank slate, something new. And I think to redress that imbalance, and that newness, you see, can put a great responsibility on you, and a great pressure on you. And that also it can result in a certain sense of loneliness, of disconnection. Whereas actually, if you say, no, I am from this culture, I am of this culture, I am an inheritor of this culture, you can feel connected to the story that has brought us here today, the story in the past. And by engaging in the art of the past, we can begin to formulate a conversation with it. And in that conversation, you'll overhear yourself saying interesting things, and knots will be unraveled. Problems will solve themselves that once sort of confused or baffled us. That's the experience people have when you start to engage in your ancestral culture. Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Lovely. That's really lovely. So I would say, what a journey. Thank you, Owen, for sharing your profound wisdom and showing us that how to weave the ancient roots into our uh, past and modern lives. So thank you so much for this. And for the listeners, I'd love to mention, like, always remember that loneliness may be a kind of epidemic, but connecting with your stories and art and traditions of our ancestors can definitely bring us back to a place of wholeness. So, if you love today's episode, do not forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And also, let's continue this journey together towards a healthier minds and a richer lives. So, until next time, this is your host Avik signing off. And as I always say, stay mindful, stay creative, and stay connected. So, thank you so much.